as Rick was saying, my name is Jeremy Johnson, and I'm a cyber threat intelligence analyst at Ford Motor Company. Previous to that, I was in our detection center in our SOC and working there. But if you'll indulge me for a moment, I'd like to talk about one of my other passions for just a brief moment, photography. So this is a picture that I took back on a trip last October to Scotland. My wife and I were driving around the Isle of Mull, which is one of the Hebridean Isles on the west side of this country. And we ran across these two shipwrecked or beached boats. And really throughout the entire trip, this is probably one of my favorite pictures. And I just want to take a moment, because this is the biggest I've seen it, and it's actually pretty cool. But like most photographers, one of the things I try to reduce or minimize in my photos is noise. So what is noise? It's something that is kind of annoying to deal with, and it happens when you're shooting in lower light. And what it looks like, if you look in that picture, you'll notice it's not really a smooth gradient. It looks like there's some dots that don't quite add up or that don't quite fit. But when you look at the entire picture, it still works. So a bit of history about this picture. This is Bob Moore, and you might know him from Bob's Red Mill. And you might know Bob's Red Mill from all those plastic bags you see in like the baking aisle or the cereal aisle. And this was taken at the Golden Spurtle, which is the World Championship of Porridge. So completely random event, but we stumbled across it. It was pretty cool. I had porridge with squid ink. Crazy stuff. But anyways, I could use this picture, or I couldn't really use this picture and blow it up really big. The noise is going to have too much of an impact. And when I build my shrine to the patron saint of porridge, I'll have to use a smaller picture, something like an 8x10 or a 4x6, to help minimize the effect the overall noise has. And indicators are really the same way. Not all indicators are perfect, 100%. We're going to fire off an offense or fire off an incident right away. And also, like indicators, or like my vacation photos, there's too many indicators and not enough time. So there are millions of feeds out there, paid, unpaid, open source type intel. And part of my job is making sure that we bring the most relevant stuff into our company. And even then, even when we pare down to the relevant stuff, a lot of these indicators have, there's noise, there's false positives that we have to deal with. And the lower fidelity ones give us kind of a quandary. Do we deal with the noise that they introduce into our system, or do we miss the opportunity to detect that weirdness altogether? And when it comes down to it, from a practical standpoint, some noise is going to be acceptable. You can't really deal with an indicator, or you're never going to get everything that's 100%. And if you do have something that's 100%, think of all the stuff that you're probably missing. And the flip side of that, though, too much noise will flood your SOC. And coming from the detection role, I can tell you it's not just about having your detectors complain about being too busy. It's actually a lot more insidious than that. And when they first started, or when we first turned on our SIM, we had this rule that would fire that was for excessive firewall denies. And it would catch one of three things. It'd either catch unauthorized software, misconfigured software, or actual malware. However, when you deploy that rule across an enterprise of 100+ thousand endpoints, you're going to have a lot of noise. And we were getting about 400 or 500 hits a day at first. And the real impact of this isn't just wasting time. It's the fact that every time we looked at one of those alerts, our perception of it was bias. So bias isn't just an issue with the intel side of things. It can be passed down to your SOC. And really, it's a terrible place to be, just to automatically assume that this is going to be a false positive. So how do we reduce that noise, and how do we still try to find a way of keeping some of these lower fidelity indicators? In fact, why do we even want to really bother with these low fidelity indicators? So, because I'm talking about high fidelity, low fidelity, and all that, I just kind of wanted to draw some arbitrary lines in the sand And that's really what these are. These are completely arbitrary numbers just for the sake of argument. You could probably go back to your own environments and do some cool math or statistics or science and get better numbers for this. But for the sake of argument, anything above 70%, I'm going to say is high fidelity. Anything between that and 40% is like a medium fidelity sort of rule, or IOC. And anything below 40 is just low fidelity. So why do we even want to bother using these low fidelity indicators? Are they just an indicator of exhaustion, something that makes our SOC hate us that much more? No, they don't have to be. What we can do is take these IOCs and apply them surgically. And one example that I heard, and I can't take credit for this, this is something Rob Lee said. That's Rob Lee with the hair, or Little Rob, I think is the correct way of saying it. But Bing in your industrial control system environment, if you see Bing coming from a PLC, there's probably something fishy going on there. But if you see Bing in your corporate environment, it really just means somebody hasn't heard of Google. And then to go back to the example of the firewall denies, if we could have taken that rule and stuck it on just our executive machines, for example, we probably could have gotten a lot more value out of it. Because the two things that were catching most of, unauthorized misconfigured software, would have been much less of an issue at that level. They have bigger, or they've got better machines, or better managed machines at least, and they tend to do less weird stuff. But the issue with applying things surgically and trying to pare all this stuff down is everybody likes to feel special. And that's not one of my pictures, sadly. Stock photography. But some roles are going to be more important to the overall business than others. And this is coming from a private enterprise perspective. So, I mean, government might be a little bit different. But not everybody really contributes to the business equally. There are certain applications or certain infrastructure that if it goes down, your company is now losing money or reputation, or it just can't function. And when you really pare it down, critical assets are only a fraction of the overall assets of your business. And those are the special people that we really want to protect. So why don't we take these high-value assets and these lower fidelity indicators and merge them together? So much like with the picture, the 4x6 is going to have less issue with noise. It's still the same picture as something the size of a poster, but the noise is just less noticeable. And what this is allowing us to do is it's allowing us to still keep some of the detection opportunities in our environment, and it's helping reduce the overall noise. But more so, it's making sure that the stuff that's business critical still has, it has more monitoring than your average asset. So we're still trying to make sure that the important stuff is watched to a higher degree than your average person. So I know that, there's lots of diagrams and everybody has a pyramid or a cone or something or a chain. This is my pyramid. This is the pyramid of importance. And it's pyramid-y. But there's three different types of categories that can go into this. And you might have some additional ones or something that kind of fits in. But the first group is important knowledge. So these are your executives or your engineers, people who have the strategic business knowledge or maybe the intellectual property that, or trade secrets that really makes your company shine out above your competition. And then under executives, it's also worth noting, you might want to put your executive assistants because really they're probably the ones running the show anyways. And then people who have some sort of heightened access. So these are going to be your network admins, database admins, even your help desk. If your help desk people have elevated permissions, those are things that adversaries will go for, so they've got higher access in your network. So you want to keep a little bit closer eye out. And then business critical infrastructure. So if you've got applications and you could go off of stuff that has like, if you want to use the confidentiality, integrity, availability triad, if anything has a 3 in one of those categories, you might want to stick it in and watch for it because, that's obviously some sort of importance. But then, and this is coming, this is probably one of my bias because I work for a small family-owned manufacturing company, is ICS devices. So, if you've got plants or something like that, you want to make sure that your plants keep pumping out whatever your product is. And one thing I didn't put on this slide, but it's still probably worth noting, is the idea of like high-risk assets. So when the Splunk guys yesterday were talking about taking people who had failed like the phishing test, they clicked the link, now they're on the list. You could use that as a way of saying, this person has shown risky behavior in the past, let's watch them a little bit closer. Or if you've had incidents that involve certain people, you might want to watch them closer as well. But then on the infrastructure side, we can look at stuff like legacy software, because, who doesn't have legacy software in their network at some point? Where do we get all this information? And we've got to really look deep inside ourselves to find it. And Rob Dartnell did an awesome job about talking about knowing yourself. And you really want to understand where your, I guess, not necessarily just where your weak points are, but where your important parts are. So like where your information and all that is. And to do this, first you want to start, for at least people, talking to your HR folks or your HR systems, something like that to help get groups of people, or at least names of stuff that's important. Your risk management folks might be a good place to start as well. They'll probably have ideas, at least different ideas than you, about what is riskier to the company. And if you're fortunate enough to have something like a governance, risk, and compliance platform, a lot of that information might already be out there for you. Fun fact, I'm in that picture somewhere. On the infrastructure side, so if you've got a change management database or an application database, those are good places to start grabbing information about what might be sensitive or what might be critical. And again, going back and talking to the risk management people, they might have different ideas of locations or applications that they see as risky. And one thing worth keeping in mind while you're searching for all this information, and it's equally important as the information you're looking for, is where you are finding it. Because this isn't going to be a one-time exercise. You're going to want to make sure that you do this constantly. It might start out as a once-a-year exercise, but as time goes on, things change. So, executives are going to come, executives are going to go. And it's the same with, engineers, help desk. All this stuff has turnover, and applications as well. Applications will be deployed. Applications sometimes be actually discommissioned. But you want to start paring down the cadence as much as you can. So from a yearly exercise to maybe quarterly, maybe to monthly, it's really something that, the fresher information you get, the better off you are. So now to this idea of heightened monitoring. What we want to do is, now that we have some sort of tiers in our pyramid of importance, we want to take indicators and assign them to them. So our lowest tier is going to be our baseline. And I was talking to somebody, and they gave me the idea of talking about fantasy football. And they gave me the terms of floaters and flyers, I think it was. I don't know. I'm absolutely terrible at fantasy football. We did a league last year, and the only reason that I exceeded the expectations was because the expectation was I was going to come in dead last. I came in 11th, which is second to last. Anyways, so with floaters, it's something that's going to provide you a little bit of value or a little bit of points in fantasy football land, and it's going to be it's something consistent, but not necessarily going to be groundbreaking. Then you've got your flyers, which are going to give you something less often, but it's going to be more groundbreaking when it does. And so those are the ones that you want to stick in your higher tiers. That way, it's you're having to deal with less overall noise in the system. And there are some tools that can help you out with this. So if you have a threat intelligence platform, something you can stick these indicators in. And like Robbie was saying this morning, you want to have some context. If you just stick a domain in and say this is bad, not really worth doing. But beyond just the context, they'll help you keep track of the confidence or the severity of the actual indicator. Then when it comes time to actually doing a lot of this action, having a SIM, and I realize I'm probably preaching to the choir here, a SIM is pretty much essential to do this. And then a case management system, something that we can use to keep track of our notes. So I know we had to talk today on notes and keeping track of all the information for our incidents. This is actually a really good place to keep track of it. It's something, hopefully you can do some searching, but more than just that, you can keep metrics on the indicators as you see them. So what does this look like in practice? And just as like a quick example, I'm going to say that we've got 3 different IOCs or 3 rules. We've got a high fidelity domain. We've got an IDS rule that's like middle of the road fidelity. Then we've got a SIM rule that sometimes it yields us really good results, but most of the time it falls kind of flat. Then we're going to say that there's 3 tiers in our pyramid of importance. So you've got your general users, or the baseline. Then we're going to glom admins and product designers together. And then at the very top, we're going to put our executives. And I'm going to apologize because while I like to consider myself a good photographer, I'm not good at PowerPoint and design and graphs. So if anybody afterwards has a better way of diagramming this, please let me know. What I was really trying to go for was, as the value of an asset goes down, they're watched by less rules. And yeah, we've got a joke in our SOC that for every PowerPoint skill you learn, you lose a technical skill. and the guy who told me this is going for an MBA. So nothing against business majors, but I just want him to know that I made that joke while he wasn't here when he watches this later. Anyways, so we're going to take our high fidelity domain and we're going to stick it at the very bottom. So it's going to be our floater. It's going to be the thing that gives us consistent value. And it's really the thing that everybody's going to be watched by. So we're going to take our medium fidelity, that IDS rule, and we're just going to ignore your general users. We're just going to watch our product designers and our executives with it. So then we're going to take that low value SIM rule, or not low value, low fidelity, and because we want to make sure that it's the lowest noise possible, we're going to stick that at the very top. So all this talk about indicators, it was probably worth mentioning that there's going to be some sort of life cycle with these. And this is Isle of Skye walking back from the ferry pools at about sunset. If you've never been to the Isle of Skye, amazing. You should go, at least twice. But whenever you get an indicator in, ideally you want to do some testing. And what we've done in the past is we've taken indicators and we've thrown them against our own logs. Like we'll look back about 30 days, see how often it shows up. And if it's below a certain number, and that number can really vary depending on your environment, if it's below that certain number, we say, okay, this is uncommon enough. If somebody else is saying it's bad, it's probably worth at least an investigation. If it's something above that magic number, we go back in and do some work. We actually will go and see, is this going to be an indicator that's valid or an indicator that's just going to be noise? And I think a good example of why you would want to test indicators would be the Grizzly Step report. Like how many people just threw that into your SIM and said, fire and see what's coming, give me what you got. I know we did, and it kind of sucked. But live and learn, right? So had we done testing on that, we've been able to tell that there's going to be some stuff that might be good, some stuff that might be bad. And the next step, you throw it in production and you watch for it. This is probably the most boring bullet point. I've got nothing else to say about that. But while it's in production, you want to make sure you're tracking the fidelity of the indicator or the rule. So Is it something that's given you value? Is it higher fidelity? Is it lower fidelity? And you can use this as a way of gauging where it should sit in your tiers. And then how long do you actually want to keep it? So IP addresses can change, domains can change. Well, I guess domains, yeah, or domains. But if you get an IP address and you were told this was bad last year, obviously it's not going to be good now. Or it's not going to be a good indicator now. And not to beat up on a dead bear, but grizzly step, some of those might have been valid indicators at the time. And if you know how long they were being used for, basically the main point here, keep indicators for as long as they're useful. What we've done in the past is if we've got indicators that like an IP address is bad, if we see it, we hold on to it. If we don't see it in 30 days, we assume, okay, this is probably a dead IP. And to keep all this going, there's going to be some maintenance involved. You're always going to have new indicators to bring in, and how you manage that is going to vary. Do you want to start from the bottom tier in your baseline and graduate indicators up, or do you want to stick indicators at your very top and bring them down as time goes on? And there's pros and cons with both approaches. If you start from the bottom up, there could be some temporary noise or something you have to deal with until you get it to the right level. If you start from the top down, you're missing the opportunity to detect things. And it's a harder question of when to move it down, at least in my opinion. So my personal suggestion, and this is my belief, is I was always start from the bottom up and just deal with the temporary noise. It'd probably be a lot easier to do that than explain why this particular indicator didn't actually fire when it was actually in your environment. But I've brought up before, keeping track of previous indicators and the fidelity of those, and we need to maintain the older indicators as well. So as time goes on, the fidelity or the confidence level might change. IPs might switch from bad to good, especially if it's in like some sort of hosting environment like GoDaddy. And assets can change too. So as I mentioned previously, something like, people get fired, people get hired, applications come and go, that sort of thing. And automation is going to be one of those areas that really helps out. So the more automation you can do, the less like legwork or monkeying you have to do yourself, the better life will be. And the next 4 slides, I titled them potential speed bumps. And I honestly really struggled with what I should title these, because these are speed bumps, but at the same time, these are 4 areas that you can really improve your SOC as a whole. And I don't want to call them means to an end. I really think in this case the means probably justify themselves. But the first one is missing internal context. So it's partially identifying information. So who is behind that particular IP address? So if you have a firewall log, how will I know if that's an executive device? Or if I see some sort of AV log and I want to investigate that, how do I know it belongs to an admin? I mean, these are things that you have to investigate your logs, figure out what data points you can hook into, and then what data you need to feed into your SIM. But then beyond just the information in your logs, who actually is important? If you can't tell me what applications are important and what IP addresses the servers might sit on, it doesn't really help me too much. I need the tactical information to really run with this. And kind of in the same vein is lack of visibility. So if you're completely missing log sources, so if you don't even have antivirus logs or firewall logs in your SIM, you're never going to see it. And so these are things that, as you go through, you need to identify and start to work to correct. Otherwise, like not observing traffic, so if you don't have NetFlow data where it would be useful, you want to look into trying to get that. Or if you've got sensors or something where like you've got an IDS that's placed right outside your border and you're not going to see internal IP addresses, that might be something worth looking into as well. And I've said automation a few times, and it's something that I guess I wouldn't really say it's nice. It's really more of a necessity. Because when it comes down to it, at least in a company my size, there's a lot of information that really has to start flowing. And it's too much that you really can't just do it manually. You're gonna burn your own people out by just shuffling around papers or digital papers. So if you want to really do this successfully, it's automate the information gathering. So when you're gathering all this information the first time, keep track of where you're doing it. Try to find opportunities or like APIs or something like that you can hook into. Or if it's some sort of homegrown application, that's even better because you can talk to the developers and see if you can get APIs baked in for you. And the last speed bump is not having a feedback loop. So you want to use indicator metrics and tie those to the tiers. If you're not doing that, you might have a bad indicator on your baseline, and I mean, where does it go from there? Do you throw it out? You need to have some sort of feedback in order to really judge these things properly. And case management systems are awesome. It's something to help keep track of not only the metrics behind it, but the historical data. So in conclusion, lower fidelity IOCs can be useful when you target them. However, there's going to be some assembly that's required. And maintenance is going to be a fact of life, but automation will save you. But out of everything I've said, if there's one particular piece of knowledge or advice or wisdom I could leave you with, it would be, it's not the fidelity of the indicator that matters, it's how you use it.